I wonder if it ever occurs to anyone what this all gas, no brake policy in the culture war, where that's going to end up. Like, where do they see the country in 5 or 10 years? What are the logical consequences of this? That doesn't seem to cross anyone's mind. So click the links, join the channel here, or over subscribe to our Odyssey and Rumble. So Little Mermaid cultural appropriation by the Hollywood parasites. Culturally appropriating fish girl says that her expected line about whatever the lack of self awareness from this Hollywood group is absolutely staggering. If you always have a cultural Marxist shield to raise by calling somebody who criticizes you Istophobic, then you will never engage with the argument on a rational level. You'll just deflect and raise that shield. You never have to actually do any cognition. It's kind of the same thing is happening with the J.K. Rowling and the Hogwarts legacy, and her statements from years ago are the most reasonable statements ever. Something, men and women have different spaces and they have needs to whatever. I've covered it a million times. And all the media can come out and just immediately call her Istophobic, which is technically an ad hominem, because at no point did they define the terms and then match the elements to the terms and say this is why she meets them and here's the counter argument. Like, the media is not the media anymore. By now you're well aware of that also. So if it's like this, an if-then statement, a logic loop, if criticism of your privileged group, i.e. if you're Pox Walks, then yes, you're the most privileged people in America right now, then it's Istophobic. It's a loop. It never requires you to actually turn on your brain. So what happened is Disney is rebooting the story taken from, I think, Hans Christian Andersen's story, except that those tricksy little folks at Disney swapped out the blue-eyed red-haired girl. Now keep in mind, red hair and blue and green eyes is the ultimate minority. It's the rare. Red and blue eyes are the rarest of the rare, and dark hair and dark eyes is the vast majority. Which is why light hair and eyes are so special, because it's rare. That's just a function of the universe. It's probably not politically correct to say that, but that's the way it is, and we all know that's the way it is. Something is special because of its rarity. You place value on things that you just don't have access to. So you can't replace the rare with the common and expect the same response. But, welcome to Disney circa current year. So anyway, the story is European, distinctly European. But the modern conflict is that up until recently, people have been letting the swapping of European characters slide. Bounding into Comics did an article. If you just search red-haired race swap characters, Bounding has they go through 50 of the last characters that have been swapped out. Once you see it, it's really hard to. I mean, you can't ignore it. If you're following this stuff, it just feels just evil is what they're doing. I mean, to be erased, like digital, it's a digital genocide, really. So European people did not speak up about it for a long time, but now there's just so much of it, so much erasure and hatred accompanying it that it's impossible to ignore. And, like Bounding into Comics and Bleeding Fool and the Comicsgate movement and the Fandom Menace, like these aren't, the left would probably look at those kind of things and whatever other groups out there, and the footprint on alt media like Rumble, Odyssey, Bit Chute, Gab TV and the rest, as like, oh, those are all these extreme far right Bounding into Comics, and you look at them, you look at Bounding into Comics, you're like, you're just absolutely out of your freaking mind if you think these people are far right. It's just they're saying very reasonable things, which whenever you say very reasonable things, suddenly you get this you get labeled of being extremist far right, and you go, well, what about the people who have viewpoints that most would consider further to the right? What are they? Oh, well, they're extra Hugo Boss. Like, none of your things make sense. If you're putting people on a spectrum, you have to put them there on a logical spectrum. You seem to think that everyone to the right of Stalin and Mao is suddenly on the far right. It's that four square political orientation thing where it's like the left wing. Was it the left wing authoritarian square? It's like it's this tiny little bit in the upper left hand corner, and everything else is just. It doesn't matter if you're libertarian, authoritarian, right or left. It's all just far extremist right-wing beliefs. Because, I mean, they have this, like, very famous purity spiral, which, good for them. I hope they accelerate that. So it's not just the swapping out of the characters, because this isn't occurring in a vacuum. The media has been pushing this anti-white hatred 24/7 for years now, and as a consequence you're seeing attacks against European Americans. And the thing is, with all social media, even mainstream social media, the ubiquitous cell phone and security cameras and all this kind of, mostly the cell phone, it helps a lot. It's like the prices come down, everyone's got it, you got it. I mean, you can send a video, a high definition video around the world. It's like there's just too much information out there, everyone's seeing what's going on. All this stuff is going on together, and before you could, like, that's why Hollywood is accelerating things on their side, is because people are kind of awakening to this and putting out a counter narrative, and any counter narrative is also extremely far right, to not want to see your tribe get subject to this stochastic terrorism or stochastic defamation at the least, and start saying, oh, well, maybe it's time that we get tribal and speak up for ourselves and advance our own interests. It's like, no, 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 you guys can't do that, but everyone else can do that. Well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense either. So I think we're going to just continue to go ahead with this. Thing is, if relations were good, and the thing is, the CGI on this looked a little funky too. Like, they released the video, and it's not just the bounding articles, images that are dark. The images themselves are dark, where in the original thing, I know it's live action versus animation, but it's like you have so much CGI now. If you want to brighten things up, that's the easiest. Let's turn the gamma a little bit up. And so the thing is, if relations were good, you'd have a different situation, but they're not. So Hollywood just continues to step on the gas with the hate-filled narrative. But nothing changes until the cattle stop feeding the machine. So it's up to the customer. If you got if the customer wants to awaken, you just don't have to support this kind of stuff. And people are slowly awakening. It lives with TikTok and the Disney with DeSantis and that kerfluffle back and forth. Like, people are slowly becoming aware of this kind of stuff. And it's not like people who live on Twitter think everyone lives on Twitter, and you realize, no, the vast majority of people are not aware of it. But it is a growing movement. So this chick, little fish girl, who is culturally appropriating the role, and to her credit, she does look like a fish, is playing the role of the Danish mermaid, but as a non European, which I'm not sure there are African mermaids. Is that part of their mythology? I don't remember, because I have read some stories. I don't think so. But the thing is, obviously, it wasn't in the original story, and it was not in the early Disney versions, I think in the 80s and 90s. So the conflict is coming because this has been building up, where every group is advocating for their tribe and is outraged at the slightest slight against them. So these non-white groups have been very privileged for a long time, but now you see the European people start to see themselves as a group and start advocating for their tribe. And now the media is pretending to be outraged over people who are just starting to get tribal. It's like, everyone else is tribal, but this one group can't get tribal, but now they're finally starting to get tribal. But the thing is, their language, their appeals to emotion, it all works two ways. For example, blonde and red-haired Europeans are the most marginalized and oppressed people on Earth, because they're literally being erased in films and in stories, and the media machine is endlessly directing hatred towards them. Now, that wasn't an appeal to emotion. That's a cogent, logical argument. I provided some evidence. So that's, I mean, like, how do you counter that? And when you present it to this left wing, it's like, well, they don't have a counter to it other than an ad hominem, a deflection, and some other argumentative fallacies. So I feel we're oppressed and marginalized by the most powerful and dangerous group on earth, the media. If you feel it, it's true. In fact, you can see how the media comes out to label and attack anyone who criticizes these anti-European shows. They're immediately labeled as Islamophobic. There's no discussion about both sides of an issue, about the cultural Marxism, because the media are the cultural Marxists. Hollywood puts the propaganda out there, and the media attacks anyone who disagrees. They're just one narrative machine. The girl, she sounds like a puppet. I won't say a useful idiot. That might be a little bit harsh. But she's been fed a victim narrative her whole life, and it never occurs to her that she might be in the wrong, and that her narrative is in the wrong, that everyone has been lying to her. It's like, have you ever stopped to think how you think you know what you know? Like, what are some assumptions you have? Like, you just know things about certain things, then you go like, oh, where did I learn that from? Or what would it take to disprove that? And like, do I really know that? Or do I know it because Hollywood has fed me a narrative my whole life? And it happens like that when you start going down the rabbit hole, taking that red pill, putting on the sunglasses, and you start to realize, oh, I don't really know about this issue because it came from a biased source. It came, like, Hollywood told me what they wanted me to tell me. It's like, you have to read some books about that. And even when you read the books, you have to look at the authors and go, okay, well, what is their personal bias in this narrative? Anyway, it never occurs to her that maybe, just maybe, she's in the wrong. And to be fair, if it did occur to her, she wouldn't really fit in Hollywood because that's not what Hollywood wants. Hollywood has a narrative to push. In her mind, she's taken a role written by a European for a European audience, enjoyed by Europeans from European mythology for a 100-plus-year-old story with a red-haired, blue-eyed Northern European girl as the mermaid. It never occurs to her that she's in the wrong, that Disney is a group of very bad people who are using her. Never crosses her mind to switch the story around. If Disney was telling an African story and they got a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German to play Seti Wayu or Panda in the Shaka Zulu story, her and her crowd on Twitter would lose their freaking minds. It never occurs to them to see things from the other perspective. The other issue is, what do you mean these people? Is when she raises the shield of simply calling her critics Islamophobic, does she realize that most racism in America is anti-white and most religious prejudice is anti-Christian? The media has been pushing a narrative of anti-white stochastic terrorism. The media wants violence. If you haven't noticed their bias in reporting by now, then you've been purposely trying to disengage from it. You've been asleep. None of this changes until you start speaking up against the mainstream media, the Hollywood narrative. You can use their syntax and dialogue, and use appeals to emotion also if you want to have some fun with it. This behavior is dangerous anti-white hate speech because it focuses hatred and violence against a marginalized and oppressed group. The beautiful people of the light, the European Americans, are the one group that the media directs hatred against. That's the disenfranchisement. And, I say that a little humorously, but that's all true. Like, that's not an appeal to emotion. Those are actual appeals to logic. Those things are actually all true. Anyway, I don't know when this is coming out in a few months. It's probably going to do just fine because it's kind of the Wakanda situation with the Black Panther, where that was got just $1 billion because there was a lot of energy behind it. This doesn't have that kind of energy, but I think people will see it because, she's the girl in the role, and it's like they count this up as a win to take something away from from the earlier narrative. It's like it's not really a win. It's actually more of an insult if you stop to think about it, because like they didn't. It's not your organic story. You're taking somebody else's story. And like Hollywood is telling you a lot in between the lines here. What they think about people of European descent and what they think about people of African descent. They have this whole thing built up in their mind. And there's a lot more going on between the lines, but I suppose this will have to do. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, join the Subscribe Star, where there's occasionally some more honest videos that go on. Subscribe Star, Odyssey, Rumble, Bit Chute, and I'll see you guys all next episode.